Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I travel for work a lot. My company sends me to different cities every few weeks to meet with clients and handle technical installations. The downside is spending a lot of time in hotel lobbies, waiting for flights, checking in early, or just killing time between meetings. That day, I had finished a client meeting early and my flight wasn't until the next morning. The hotel had a nice lobby with comfortable seating and free charging stations, so I figured I'd camp out there for a while and catch up on some personal stuff. My phone was nearly dead from using GPS all day to navigate the unfamiliar city. I found a quiet corner with a bench near a charging outlet and plugged in my phone. The lobby was pretty peaceful with just a few business travelers typing on laptops and the occasional guest checking in at the front desk. I was scrolling through messages and trying to relax after a stressful day when this older guy, probably in his 60s, walked over and sat on the bench right next to mine. At first, I didn't think much of it. The lobby had plenty of seating, but maybe he needed to charge his phone too. Then his phone rang. Instead of answering it normally, he put it on speaker and cranked the volume all the way up. I'm talking loud enough that I could hear every word from 10 feet away. The conversation was some boring business call about quarterly reports and budget allocations, but he was practically shouting into his phone. The old guy started yelling into his phone about being at the hotel and asking what the caller meant about numbers not adding up. The voice on the other end was just as loud, echoing through the lobby. I looked around and saw other guests looking over with annoyed expressions. The hotel staff at the front desk kept looking in our direction. I figured he'd wrap up the call quickly, but 10 minutes went by and he was still going strong. I tried to focus on my phone, but it was impossible to concentrate with him bellowing right next to me. He kept shouting about how something wasn't what he said in an email, getting more agitated by the minute. I decided to give him some space. Maybe he didn't realize how loud he was being. I unplugged my phone and moved to a table across the lobby, probably 30 feet away from him. I could still hear every single word. This guy was talking like he was trying to communicate across a construction site. The poor person on the other end of the call was getting an earful about expense reports and client meetings. Other guests started moving away from the area too. 20 more minutes passed. I checked the time on my phone and realized I'd been listening to this guy's business meeting for half an hour. He showed no signs of wrapping up, and his volume hadn't decreased at all. He started ranting about not caring what some client says and that they were doing things his way. That's when I lost my patience. I'm usually pretty good about confronting people politely when they're being inconsiderate. A simple request to lower their voice usually does the trick. But something about this guy's complete obliviousness to everyone around him rubbed me the wrong way. I pulled out my phone and opened my music app. I scrolled through my playlists until I found something that would get his attention. Killswitch Engage seemed perfect with heavy metal, screaming guitars and pounding drums. I set the volume to about 50%. I didn't want to torture the hotel staff or other guests, but it needed to be loud enough to make my point. The opening riffs of my curse started blasting from my phone speakers. The effect was immediate. The old guy's head snapped in my direction, and I could see him trying to talk over the music. He told whoever was on the phone to hold on because there was some noise, then complained that he couldn't hear them. I kept my eyes glued to my phone screen, pretending to be completely absorbed in whatever I was looking at. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see him staring at me with his mouth hanging open. He seemed to be debating whether to say something. The person on his call asked if he could move somewhere quieter. He started to agree and began getting up, but then seemed to think better of it. Instead, he turned toward me and opened his mouth like he was going to complain. I just kept staring at my phone, nodding my head slightly to the beat of the music. After about 30 seconds of this standoff, something clicked for him. He reached for his phone and turned the volume down to a reasonable level. When his volume dropped, I paused my music. The sudden silence was beautiful. He apologized to the person on his call, saying there was some interference, and asked if they could hear him better now. The voice confirmed it was much better, and they continued talking about quarterly projections. The rest of his conversation continued at a normal volume. I could barely hear him from across the lobby, which was exactly how phone conversations should be in public spaces. I sat there for another hour, peacefully browsing the internet and charging my phone. The old guy finished his call and left without making eye contact with me. My husband's sister is what people call an influencer. She has about 50,000 followers on various platforms and considers herself a content creator. She films everything: her morning coffee, her workout routine, random strangers at the grocery store, family dinners. Everything is content to her. While I respect that it's her career choice, I've made it very clear that I don't want to be part of it. About 6 months ago, she posted a video of our last family gathering without asking anyone. I was in the background, clearly visible, having what I thought was a private conversation with my mother-in-law about some personal issues I was dealing with at work. The video went semi-viral in our local community, and suddenly I had co-workers and even my boss asking me about things I'd never intended to share publicly. It was humiliating and unprofessional. Since then, I've asked her multiple times to either warn me when she's filming or blur out my face in posts. Each time it turns into this huge drama about how I'm ruining her authentic content and being difficult. My mother-in-law usually sides with her, saying I'm being too sensitive about social media. When my birthday was coming up last weekend, I decided to be proactive. 3 days before our dinner reservation, I sent a message in our family group chat making it crystal clear that I didn't want to be filmed. She could film the food, the restaurant, whatever else she wanted, just not my face. She replied with just 2 words telling me she understood. I should have known better. We met at this nice Italian place downtown. Nothing fancy, but they have good food and a cozy atmosphere. It was supposed to be a small celebration with me, my husband, his sister, his mom, and 2 of our close friends. I was actually looking forward to a relaxing evening. We hadn't even ordered appetizers when I noticed her phone was already out and positioned at an angle that would capture our entire table. I leaned over and spoke quietly to her, reminding her not to point it at me. She brushed off my concern, telling me I looked great and that she was just capturing vibes without focusing on me specifically. My husband immediately backed me up, reminding her that she had already agreed to my request. She rolled her eyes but lowered the phone. I thought maybe we'd gotten through to her. 2 minutes later, the phone was back up and she was narrating something about family dinner energy while panning across all of us. I tried to stay calm. This was my birthday dinner and I didn't want to cause a scene. But then the cake came out. The restaurant staff brought out this little chocolate cake with a sparkler on top and they started singing happy birthday. It was sweet and exactly the kind of low-key celebration I wanted. But when the singing started, she jumped up from her seat and held her phone directly in front of my face, announcing that she was doing a birthday girl reveal and talking about what a beautiful moment it was. That was my breaking point. I reached up and placed my hand over her camera lens. I didn't grab her phone, I didn't touch her, I just blocked the camera for a few seconds. I told her to stop, she lost it. She started yelling about how I had ruined her shot and that this was her job. She went on about how I didn't understand that she now had to scrap everything she had filmed. The entire restaurant went quiet. The server, who was still standing there with the cake, looked mortified. I felt my face burning with embarrassment, but I wasn't backing down. I reminded her that it was my birthday and I had asked her not to film me. That's when my mother-in-law decided to chime in, suggesting that I should just let it go for one night and that it wasn't that big of a deal. I told her that actually, it was a big deal to me, and it was my night. The tension at the table was thick. My husband tried his best to change the subject, asking our friends about their recent vacation, but his sister kept complaining about her ruined content and how I was being impossible. Due to some mix-up with the bill, I ended up paying for my own dessert on my own birthday. We left pretty quickly after that, and the drive home was painfully silent. I thought maybe things would blow over, but the next morning I woke up to a long text from her. She told me she couldn't believe I had humiliated her like that in front of everyone and made her look completely unprofessional. She explained that she had planned this whole birthday content series and now had to throw it all away because I decided to make a scene. She emphasized that this was literally how she made money and that I didn't seem to care at all. Then my mother-in-law called. She told me that if I really didn't want to be in the video, I could have just moved to a different seat or turned away. She said that making that big gesture during the song when everyone was already looking just seemed unnecessary. Even my husband, who had supported me during the dinner, started second-guessing things. He told me that while he thought my boundary was fair and she should have respected it, maybe the timing wasn't great. He suggested that doing it during the song when all eyes were already on me probably made it seem more dramatic than it needed to be. I started questioning myself. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I should have handled it differently. But then I remembered how many times I'd asked her nicely before, how she'd posted me without permission in the past, and how she'd literally agreed, just 3 days earlier, not to film me. The final straw came 2 days later when I found out she'd actually posted some of the footage from before the cake incident. There I was, clearly visible in the background of her family dinner vibe story. Despite everything we'd discussed, when I called her out on it, she claimed it was old content she'd forgotten about. That's when I decided enough was enough. I screenshot all our conversations about filming boundaries and posted them in the family group chat. I explained that since there seemed to be some confusion about what happened at dinner, I wanted to share the evidence. I pointed out that I had set a clear boundary 3 days in advance. It was ignored repeatedly throughout the evening, and now I was being made to feel bad about standing up for myself on my own birthday. The group chat went silent for a full day. Then my mother-in-law responded with some generic comment about how we all needed to take a step back and remember we're family. But my husband finally stepped up. He told his mom that I was right, and this wasn't about family drama. He explained that this was about basic respect and consent, and that I had asked nicely multiple times, set the boundary in advance, and it was still ignored. A week later came the real satisfaction. Apparently, several people who had seen her posts over the months had started commenting about how they noticed she always filmed people without asking. One of her brand sponsors saw the comments and reached out to ask about her consent practices for featuring people in her content. When she realized that her lack of boundaries was actually hurting her professional reputation, she suddenly became very interested in respecting people's wishes about being filmed. She sent me a long apology text, admitting that she had been wrong and promising to do better in the future. My mother-in-law never directly apologized, but she did start asking before taking photos at family gatherings. My next birthday dinner was blissfully camera-free. I work as a court clerk, and let me tell you, I've seen some wild stuff over the past 5 years, but nothing prepared me for what happened with the most entitled woman I've ever encountered. I got into this job right after college because I wanted to work in the legal system but wasn't ready for law school yet. The pay isn't amazing, but I get to see how justice works up close. Most days are pretty routine. People come in for traffic violations, small claims, that sort of thing. The judge I work with is fair but doesn't tolerate nonsense. So there I was, organizing files for the morning session when this woman storms through the courtroom doors. She was maybe in her 40s and acting like she owned the place. She had this air about her that screamed trouble. The bailiff called her case a simple speeding ticket. She was caught going 85 in a 55 zone, which is pretty serious. The officer who issued the ticket was there with his dash cam footage and everything. When the judge asked her to approach, she walked up like she was ready for war. The judge asked her to state her name for the record and explain why she was contesting this citation. Karen immediately went on the attack, claiming she shouldn't even be there. She said the whole thing was ridiculous and accused the cop of trying to meet some quota. She insisted she was being targeted because she drove a nice car. The judge looked at the paperwork and the officer's report. He told her that according to the officer's testimony and the dash cam footage, she was traveling 30 miles per hour over the speed limit. He said the evidence seemed pretty clear-cut. Karen shot back that it was impossible because she never speeded. She claimed to be a safe driver who had been driving for 20 years without a single ticket. The judge pulled up her driving record on his computer. I could see it from my desk. She had 3 previous speeding tickets in the last 2 years. He told her that her driving record showed multiple violations and that this would actually be her 4th speeding citation since 2022. That's when things got interesting. She started getting louder. She yelled that those tickets were all mistakes too and accused everyone of just wanting to steal money from hard-working citizens. She screamed that it was all corruption. The officer stepped forward and offered to play the dash cam footage. The judge agreed and we all watched as clear as day. Her white SUV flying past other cars. The officer's speedometer showing 85 miles per hour when he clocked her. The judge said the evidence was overwhelming and that she was clearly speeding. He announced he was upholding the citation and that the fine was $350 plus court costs. Karen completely lost it. She shouted that it was insane and demanded he dismiss it immediately. She asked if he knew who she was and bragged that her husband was friends with the mayor. The judge replied that he didn't care if her husband was friends with the governor. He said the law applied to everyone equally and declared the case closed. That's when she completely lost it. She started screaming about how the system was rigged and how she was going to sue everyone in the room. The judge tried to calm her down by telling her she needed to lower her voice and exit the courtroom. He said her case had been decided. Karen refused, shouting that she wasn't paying the ridiculous fine and that no one could make her. The judge told security to escort her out. The bailiff started walking toward her, but before he could reach her, she did something I still can't believe. She actually jumped over the clerk's table, my table, and started charging toward the judge's bench. She screamed that he couldn't do this to her and threatened to make him pay for it. The whole courtroom erupted. People were gasping and standing up. I dove out of the way when she knocked over my coffee mug and scattered papers everywhere. But here's the thing about court security. They don't mess around. 2 bailiffs were on her before she made it 3 steps toward the judge. One grabbed her from behind while the other blocked her path. She yelled at them to get their hands off her, claiming it was assault and threatening to sue all of us. They wrestled her to the ground right there in front of everyone. She was kicking and screaming like a toddler, having a meltdown. It took both officers to hold her down while she thrashed around on the floor. One bailiff told her to stop resisting or they'd add more charges. Karen screamed back that she wasn't resisting and accused them of attacking an innocent woman. The judge just sat there watching this chaos unfold, then reached for his gavel. He announced that he was adding contempt of court to her charges and upgrading this to criminal court for assault on court personnel and disrupting judicial proceedings. That's when reality hit her. Her whole attitude changed in an instant. She started begging, saying she was sorry and that she just got upset. She pleaded with him not to press charges. The judge told her she should have thought about that before she jumped over furniture and charged at him. He ordered the bailiffs to remove her from his courtroom. They dragged her out while she begged and pleaded. The whole thing probably lasted less than 2 minutes, but it felt like forever. The other people waiting for their cases just sat there, with their mouths open. After she was gone, the judge looked around the room and told everyone that this should be a lesson. He said respectful behavior was expected in his courtroom at all times with no exceptions. I spent the next hour cleaning up the mess she made and reorganizing all my scattered paperwork. My coffee had spilled all over some important documents. I found out later that her original speeding ticket, which would have been $350, turned into multiple charges totaling over $5,000 in fines. Plus, she had to spend 3 days in jail for contempt of court. Her husband had to hire a lawyer just to keep her from facing more serious felony charges. My dad had served in the same unit 20 years earlier, so I knew what I was getting into. The training was tough but fair, and I actually enjoyed the technical aspects of operating the tank systems. I was good at math and had steady hands, which made me a natural fit for the gunner position. Our tank crew had 4 people. There was me as the gunner, a loader who had to handle the heavy tank shells that weighed around 45 to 50 kilograms each, a driver who was supposed to get us from place to place smoothly, and our tank commander who knew all the positions but mostly stayed busy with briefings and paperwork. The loader was this quiet guy from the countryside who worked harder than anyone I'd ever met. He'd spend hours cleaning the 3 machine guns after exercises and never complained about the heavy lifting. The tank commander was fair and experienced, always looking out for the crew. Then there was our driver. This guy was a piece of work. Even on good days, he had this attitude like the world owed him something. He'd complain about everything, snap at people for no reason, and just generally make everyone around him miserable. The worst part was his driving. A good driver makes the ride smooth even over rough terrain, but this guy would hit every bump and dip like he was aiming for them. When you're in a tank crew, you basically live together. You sleep in the tank during exercises, share everything, and get to know each other really well. There's no privacy. You even have to piss in water bottles sometimes. Most crews develop this bond where you can almost read each other's minds and work together without having to talk. But with our driver being such a pain, that never really happened for us. We got assigned to this exercise at a remote base in the middle of the desert. Budget cuts meant they could only send 1 tank instead of a whole company, so we were supposed to pretend we were an entire tank unit. We arrived on Sunday and spent Monday through Wednesday night doing the exercise. The whole time the driver was being an even bigger ass than usual. I don't know if his girlfriend dumped him or what, but he was impossible to deal with. His driving was so bad that our tank commander almost broke a rib when we hit a particularly nasty bump. I nearly got a black eye when we were shooting while moving, and he drove straight into a small ditch just when I was looking through the gun sight. By Thursday morning, when the exercise ended, the loader and I couldn't wait to get away from this guy for the weekend. But first, we had to do maintenance day. The rule was simple. You couldn't go home until all your maintenance work was completed and signed off by the tank commander. The flip side was that once you finished, you could leave and start your weekend early. The gunner position has relatively light maintenance duties compared to the driver, who has to work on the tracks and all the steel wheels. One job I did have was cleaning the main cannon with an oiled cleaning rod. This definitely requires 3 people. 1 loader inside the tank, and 2 people working from the outside. It's not physically possible for 1 person to do it alone no matter how strong they are. I walked over to the driver and asked him to help me with the cannon cleaning since the loader was already positioned inside the tank. He angrily told me he didn't want to hear from me or speak to me, then turned his back on me and walked away. Fine, I wasn't going to beg him. I found another soldier from a different crew who was taking a break, and he gave me a hand for a few minutes. We got the cannon cleaned without any problems. I finished the rest of my maintenance work pretty quickly with help from the loader, then I gave him a hand cleaning the 3 machine guns. The gunner position really doesn't have much maintenance compared to other positions, so we were both completely done before lunchtime. We were just waiting for our tank commander to inspect our work and sign off so we could head home and start our weekend early. Meanwhile, the driver was still working on the tank tracks. This is normally a job where all the drivers from different crews help each other out, or sometimes the whole crew pitches in together. But since he had told us to go away and refused to work with us, he was stuck doing everything alone. Track maintenance is brutal work. You have to adjust the tension, tighten dozens of bolts, grease multiple ports, and check every single steel wheel in the track system. It's designed to be done by multiple people working together. We watched him struggle with the work hours dragged on. The loader and I had our stuff packed and were ready to leave, but we couldn't go until everyone's maintenance was complete and signed off. The driver complained that the work was taking forever and he couldn't get the tension right on the left track. Our tank commander asked if he needed help with anything, but the driver stubbornly insisted he had it under control. But he clearly didn't have it. The afternoon wore on, and it became obvious he was way behind. When it started getting dark, the safety regulations kicked in. The tank commander told him he had to stop working for safety reasons because no maintenance work was allowed in the dark. The driver protested that he wasn't even close to finished. The tank commander explained that he should have accepted help when it was offered, and now he'd have to continue the work tomorrow morning. This meant the driver had to stay on base Friday morning to finish his maintenance work while the rest of us got to go home and enjoy an extra day of leave. He missed out on a full day of his weekend because he was too stubborn and nasty to work with his own crew. We watched his face when he realized what had happened. He looked around at the three of us with our gear packed, ready to head home, while he was stuck with hours of work still ahead of him. The driver whined that it wasn't fair and that we should help him finish. The tank commander reminded him that he had made it clear he didn't want help, and that was on him. We left him there and headed home. I got an extra day to visit my family and relax before having to come back to base on Sunday. When we returned on Sunday, I thought maybe his attitude would improve after learning this lesson the hard way. But nothing changed. He was still the same miserable, difficult person to work with. The difference was that now the loader and I knew we didn't have to put up with his attitude when it came to getting our work done. For the next 2 months, whenever he refused to help with crew tasks or started acting like a jerk, we'd just find other people to work with. He'd end up struggling alone while the rest of us finished our work efficiently and got to leave early or have more free time. After about 2 more months of his nonsense, he got transferred out to a different unit. I have no idea where he ended up and I don't really care. The loader, tank commander, and I stayed friends even after our service ended. My dog Penny had been my constant companion since my sophomore year of college. I found her outside my dorm and somehow convinced my roommate to let me keep her. She was this little golden retriever mix who had the biggest heart and the worst habit of stealing socks. Penny got me through everything. Late night study sessions, my first heartbreak, the stress of job hunting, moving to a new city. She was more than a pet, she was family. 2 months ago, everything changed in an instant. I came home from work on a Tuesday evening ready to take Penny for our usual walk around the block. But she wasn't at the door like always. I found her lying peacefully in her favorite sunny spot by the kitchen window. The vet later said it was probably a heart condition we never knew about. She just went to sleep and didn't wake up. I took that Wednesday off to deal with everything, the vet visits, cremation arrangements, and honestly just to cry my eyes out. But Thursday morning I dragged myself to work because bills don't pay themselves, and I couldn't afford to burn through all my paid time off. I wasn't myself, obviously. Usually I'm pretty social at work. I'll chat about weekend plans, share funny memes in the group chat, grab coffee with colleagues. But that week, I just couldn't do it. I showed up, did my work, attended meetings when necessary, and went home. I wasn't rude to anyone. I just didn't have the energy for small talk or pretending to laugh at someone's joke about their weekend brewery tour. My desk is in this cluster with 5 other people. There's Sarah, who handles client communications, Mike from the design team, Jennifer from accounting, and then there's this guy I'll call Karen since he acted just like one. Karen works in business development and thinks he's the office comedian. He's always trying to get everyone to look at his phone to see some viral video or making loud comments about whatever sports game happened the night before. The first day back, Karen rolled his chair over to my desk around 10 in the morning. He asked if I'd seen some video he sent in the group chat about a cat wearing tiny sunglasses. I told him I was busy and maybe I'd look at it later. He gave me this weird look but went back to his desk. An hour later, he was back asking me to settle some argument between him and Mike about pineapple on pizza. I said I didn't have an opinion and was trying to focus on my report. This went on for days. Every morning, Karen would try to drag me into some conversation about nothing. When I didn't engage, he'd make these little comments under his breath about how I was being weird or antisocial. Friday afternoon, he wheeled over again while I was finishing up a client analysis. He asked what my weekend plans were and made some comment about hoping I wasn't going to be a hermit again. I just said I was staying home. Then he told me I've been really negative lately and was bringing down the whole vibe. That hit me wrong, but I didn't have the energy to explain that I was grieving. I just turned back to my computer. He made some comment about me being antisocial and rolled away. The following Monday, I got an email from Jennifer in Human Resources asking me to come to her office. My stomach dropped because getting called to HR is never good news. I knocked on her door around 2 in the afternoon. She asked me to sit down and said she wanted to talk about something that was brought to her attention. When I asked what was going on, she explained they'd received an anonymous report about my behavior lately. Someone had mentioned that I'd been unapproachable and creating a negative atmosphere in my work area. I told her I've been doing my work and not bothering anyone. She said the report mentioned that I've been cold and dismissive when colleagues tried to interact with me, and it had made someone feel uncomfortable in their workspace. I explained that I'd lost my dog the previous week and had just been keeping to myself while dealing with that. She apologized for my loss and said she had no idea, but explained that they had to address these kinds of concerns when brought to their attention. She basically asked if someone had complained that I was sad about my dog dying. She said the complaint was more about the impact my demeanor was having on others and suggested maybe I could try to be more engaged with my team. I left that meeting feeling absolutely furious. Someone actually took time out of their day to complain to HR because I wasn't entertaining them while I was grieving. But I didn't know who it was, so I couldn't even defend myself properly. It didn't take long to figure out though. The next morning, Karen was extra chatty with everyone except me. He'd make these big shows of laughing with Sarah and Mike, then go completely silent when I walked by. Wednesday morning, I overheard him talking to Mike by the coffee machine. He was saying that if someone's personal problems were affecting the whole team, maybe they should work from home until they got it together. Mike said I seemed fine to him, just quiet. But Karen said that the energy had been completely off and some people were trying to maintain a positive work environment. That confirmed it. I spent my lunch break looking up company policies and found something interesting in our employee handbook. Filing false or malicious reports with HR was considered a serious offense that could result in disciplinary action. I scheduled another meeting with Jennifer that afternoon. I told her I wanted to follow up on our conversation and that I thought I knew who filed the complaint. She said she couldn't discuss the identity of people who made reports, which I understood, but I explained that I had concerns about the motivation behind it. I told her about Karen's behavior, how he'd been trying to force me into conversations all week, making comments about my attitude, and then the coffee machine conversation I'd overheard. I explained that it seemed like he was upset that I wasn't participating in his daily entertainment and decided to weaponize HR against me. Jennifer looked uncomfortable but said she'd look into it. She asked if I had any witnesses to his behavior. I mentioned that Sarah and Mike had seen him bothering me multiple times, and Mike had heard the coffee machine conversation. The next day, Karen got called into HR. He was in there for over an hour. When he came out, his face was red and he wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Jennifer sent me an email later saying the matter had been resolved and apologizing for any distress the initial complaint had caused. But it gets better. During Karen's HR meeting, Jennifer had asked him to explain specific examples of my negative behavior. The only things he could come up with were that I didn't laugh at his jokes and didn't want to look at his phone. When pressed for actual work-related issues, he had nothing. Jennifer also spoke with Sarah and Mike, who both confirmed that I've been doing my job just fine, and that Karen had been pestering me constantly. Mike even mentioned the coffee machine conversation where Karen basically admitted he'd made the complaint. Our company takes false HR reports seriously. Karen got written up for filing a malicious complaint and was told that any future issues with his behavior toward co-workers would result in more serious action. He was also required to attend some workshop about workplace sensitivity. Jennifer sent out a company-wide email a few days later about respecting colleagues who might be going through difficult personal situations. She didn't mention names, but everyone knew what it was about. Karen had to sit through that email knowing everyone was thinking about how he'd tried to get someone in trouble for grieving their pet. For the next few weeks, Karen barely spoke to me, which was honestly perfect. When he did try to make conversation, it was awkward and forced. He'd start to roll his chair over, then seem to remember what happened and think better of it. This grown man couldn't handle that I wasn't in the mood to be his personal entertainment while I was dealing with loss. Instead of just leaving me alone like a normal person, he decided to try and get me in trouble at work. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.